Regularly scheduled Tuesday, June the 17th, 2025 meeting of the Waynesboro Planning Commission. Mr. Stewart, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do we have a motion regarding the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. All right, next up we have the review and approval of the May 20th, 2025 meeting minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those?
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we approve those.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next, we have public hearing for preliminary plat amendment and subdivision waiver request for section 74-71I. Is that I or 1? Grades of the subdivision ordinance by Greenwood Homes developer on behalf of Rosser Avenue Development LLC for the Creekwoods Village Subdivision Phase 2, 0 Tiffany Drive, Waynesboro, Virginia, tax map number 41-3-112. Thank you, staff.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So this is a preliminary plat amendment for Creekwood Village and specifically Phase 2. To give a little bit of reference for the area, this is the Creekwood Village subdivision development located behind the Walmart, Grands, and Martins. To the north, we've got a couple additional subdivisions, Silver Creek, Kira Heights, and then that secure store off to the west. Orient ourselves. And then just a brief background for this subdivision. Back in 2020, the property was rezoned from highway business and single-family residential large lot to RG5 and RMF, which is our general residential and residential multifamily, respectively. The rezoning was approved and subject to a concept plan and several proffers. Then in 2021, a preliminary plat was approved for the RG5 zoned area only. And it was approved for 220 lots with a mix of single-family detached, attached, and then townhouses. And they began construction in late 2021. In 2024, they submitted 2 preliminary plat amendments, one for Phase 2, which added 2 additional lots for 222 lots total, and then also that connection to the adjacent Bookerdale parcel, which is now known as Phase 4 of the development. And they also platted Phase 3, which was the RMF, residential multifamily portion, right behind the Martins. And then they also had the Phase 4 preliminary plat, which is the Bookerdale Road parcel, approved last year as well. So tonight, they are requesting another preliminary plat amendment for Phase 2 specifically. And the amendment would add 42 townhouses and then also reduces the number of single-family detached. This slide actually contains an error that I didn't correct in time. So it reduces the number of single-family detached units, but then increases slightly the single-family attached units. Apologies for the error. And then they are also requesting a subdivision ordinance waiver request for the street grade of Winterthur Road. So this is a look at the development map that was approved as part of the preliminary plat amendments for Phases 2 and 3 last year. This is the Phase 2 area that is the focus of tonight's amendment. This is the updated development map that shows the changes to Phase 2. Phases 4 and 3 are remaining the same, and they are just changing Phase 2. And so they are adding townhouses along, I believe this is Springdale Road, and they are also now have the single-family attached here. You have single-family detached along the boundary with some additional single-family attached here. This is the original, and then that's the changes.
I'm sorry, can you do that? Can you do that original and changes again?
Sure. So this is the original development map, and that's the Springdale Road right here.
Thank you.
These are the
Sorry.
proposed changes. So they're requesting to add 42 townhouses to this section and reduce the single-family detached units to 29 from 51. The proposed amendment also increases the single-family attached units from 22 to 18, to 22 from 18. And overall, this is an increase of 24 lots for a total of 246 lots within the overall original Creekwood Village subdivision, not including phases 3 and 4, which were subsequently approved. This portion of the property is zoned RG5, and they are developing under the cluster development option. And all the lots shown on the amendment do meet those specific lot requirements for the townhouse lots, the single-family attached, and then also the single-family detached. The applicants did submit an updated hydraulic analysis, which Public Works will review and approve as part of that public improvement plan process. And stormwater management for Phase 2 is going to be served by a wet pond located sort of in the rear of the property right here. And then moving on to the subdivision ordinance waiver. Per section 74-10 of the subdivision ordinance, any portion of the subdivision ordinance may be waived by city council. For section 74-71I, grades in particular, council has delegated this authority to the planning commission. And that particular section states that the maximum allowed street grade without special approval shall be 6%. And the planning commission may allow grades in excess of that where it determines that such a street grade will permit for better lot arrangements and less adverse environmental impact. In this particular case, the applicants are requesting a grade waiver from 6% to 8.5% for a portion of the Winterthur Road. Winterthur Road runs from Springdale up here down to Piney Point. Piney Point Road right here into that cul-de-sac. It's a better view of it. Grade would start after that intersection with Springdale Road, goes down, starts to level out as you hit the Piney Point Road intersection and into that cul-de-sac. This is a profile of that slope. This shows the 8.5% grade downhill towards that cul-de-sac. I was able to find a graph to demonstrate the differences between the various road grades to help demonstrate how much of a difference this would be from what was approved before. Unfortunately, this doesn't contain exactly the road grades we're discussing tonight, but reasonably close. So the closest one here is the 6.25% grade. As you can see, the green line here is that particular slope. The closest to the 8.5 would be the 8.33%. So you can see that slight rise in the level there, following that second green line, to help demonstrate the differences between the two. Public Works and the Fire Department both reviewed this subdivision ordinance waiver request. Public Works did not have concerns regarding it. Specifically, the large vehicles such as the plows and the trash trucks and school buses shouldn't have too much trouble navigating this section of the road due to that cul-de-sac. That allows for an easy turnaround to loop around and come back up. The same with that intersection. It's not a complete dead end. You can turn right or left on the Springdale. Fire department also did not have any concerns. The ladder truck is still fully operational, which is one of the primary things they looked at in this particular review. Ladder truck is still fully operational at that 8.5% grade. So having said all that, the applicant's amended plat does meet the standards of the subdivision and zoning ordinances, and staff is recommending approval of that preliminary plat. Staff is also recommending approval of the subdivision ordinance waiver request for section 74-71I for grades. The applicants are here tonight, and I'm also happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question. Is it because of the subdivision and zoning ordinances gives them a by right approval to change the layout and increase the density of the subdivision?
As long as they can always submit an amendment to a preliminary plat.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you stay within the requirements of the subdivision zoning ordinances, then yes, you can do that.
And it would be by right at that point?
It would still be by right, as long as they stay within those
And
requirements.
with them still conforming to that ordinance, there is nothing that we would be able to do about the increase in 24 additional townhome units?
So staff, when we are evaluating it, are making sure it's compliant with the zoning and subdivision ordinance. So is it meeting lot size requirements? And is it meeting density, like number of units per acre requirements? And then also checking to make sure in any of the zoning documents, if there was some kind of cap that was different from those. In this case, the zoning entitlements are actually quite higher than what is being proposed. So that's kind of staff's check to make sure it's complying with the zoning ordinance, and also any proffered conditions or stipulations of the rezoning, which is also the zoning at that point, the zoning document. So because it's compliant with those things, it is a by right development.
And there's no restrictions that can be placed on the density of that at that point?
Yeah, no, so I mean, typically, the purpose of these public hearings is to identify, certainly staff does our best to review and make sure we think that it meets the compliance of our ordinance. But if there was anyone who determined that they saw something that they didn't feel like met that, but there's really no ability to restrict number of units.
Okay.
Or types of units if they're in compliant with the zoning,
Right.
yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, when we did the preliminary plat for Creekwood, there was discussion about schools then with respect to,
So typically we cover kind of school capacity when we're doing a rezoning because we're adding new entitlements. So I'm not sure that we did
Maybe we
something
wouldn't have
like
then, yeah,
that
okay.
for the 2024 amendment. But I will note that last year when we did have several rezonings or conditional use permit requests, that school board and city staff communicate that there is capacity within the school system.
right, so that makes total sense. And because this is not I understand, thank you.
Yeah.
My only piggyback on that would be, because we're doing it up front and we have micro adjustments to the plats, the preliminary plats as they are matriculating into actual development, and we do increase density a little bit here and a little bit there, is there a loop back to the schools to say, hey, I know this is the number we projected originally, because we're sprinkling in additional density, does this change the capacity of the schools at that point?
So that's typically not something that we do, especially when the zoning entitlement, which I think is like a maximum of 600 units for this overall development, because that was vetted and reviewed through that process. But certainly at any point, we keep a master list of kind of all entitled units within the city, those that are constructed, those that are not. And certainly there would be back and forth if the school system ever had any concerns, or, we, getting ready to do the comprehensive planning process, will communicate those things. So there is a dialogue there.
So theoretically, because this was zoned this way, the potential growth and additional demand for resources should have been accounted for when it was zoned that way as a part of the comprehensive plan.
Sure, yes.
Okay. Theoretically,
Which was 20 years ago.
which was 20 years ago. Got it. Okay. Any other questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
My brain is fried this evening.
Yeah.
Do I need to open the public hearing before we hear from the applicant?
I think that's fine.
Okay. Now going to open the public hearing for preliminary plat amendment and subdivision waiver request for section 74-71I, grades of the subdivision ordinance by Greenwood Homes, developer on behalf of Rosser Avenue Development LLC, owner for the Creekwood Village subdivision Phase 2, 0 Tiffany Drive, Waynesboro, Virginia, tax map number 41-3-112. Public hearing is now open. I think we'd like to hear from from the applicant if they would like to speak, and then we'll see if we've got any folks that are signed up.
Thank you, Councilman, Councilwoman. I'm Chris Schooley. I'm Vice President of Land Development for Greenwood Homes, and we have been the developer of Creekwood from the start, and we are the sole builder at Creekwood. We will keep this fairly short. We are here for two main reasons. I'll start with the road slope. I don't know if you've noticed, Alice, can I use your, okay, you have great images. Go back to the overall that shows other parcels. I think we all see the Rosser Avenue development more than everything else when we drive past it. That's the D.R. Horton townhouse, and it is adjacent to our Phase 3. There's been a large pile of rock back there for a long time, and they're working through it. Of course, we are adjacent to it for our Phase 3, which is right here. The way land development works is that if you have 30% of your cut in rock, it's thought of as a quarry. Our site contractor is Partners. They're out of Harrisonburg, which is called Rocktown. They said they've never seen over 60%. Our site in Phase 3 was 100%. We had 100% rock. Everything that we had to cut was in rock. So the answer for that was we spent $1.5 million blasting rock for 2 months to try to move this. So our response was we went to Caleb Orndorff and Valley Engineering when we went to Phase 3, and we said, this is an established neighborhood. We're going to be much closer to our neighbors that are here now. It's important for us when we develop Phase 2 to stay out of the rock. So if you think of how land development works, there's an existing grade that generally has a slope. Our goal is to cut, like take dirt out equal to the amount that we fill. That way it's called balancing. So that amount of dirt that we cut is then moved over to the fill. Because we want to stay out of the rock, we have to stay out of the cut part. So we've sourced enough material to bring in to fill this entire Phase 2. So it is now higher than it was before. But that requires the road that connects down to Piney Point to be at a higher slope. So because of rock, that requires the road slope to go from 6.5% to 8.2%. So that's the slope percentage. It's merely a goal of ours to stay out of rock because it's better for everyone. I think our neighbors would agree that they would rather us not be hammering rock for months or have to go through the protocols by the fire marshal to blast rock. The second is the density. And this is a great graphic because it shows the before and the after, these two. What we have done in the after is everything that can be a basement is now on the outside. So the villas can be basements and the single families can be basements. Those are on the outside. The townhouses, which have done very well in Phase 1C and 1D, and we're about ready to have more in Phase 3 for affordable housing purposes, they reach a lower price point. Those are not on basements. They have to be on slabs. So they fit best on the site in the areas in here. I think our neighbors, which are probably mostly in this area and are concerned with the proximity of what we're doing for the next development, saw this previously. These are villas, which are just like the villas that are in 1A and 1B, and now they're going to be townhouses in this area. One thing to note is the townhouses are not nearly as deep of a unit, so they are further away from the existing houses. And secondly, you can see the building volume that you get with the villas that are this close together is also quite tight. The villas are large houses. So you end up with a fairly strong built environment in this area as well, and it is closer to the back of the lot versus the townhouses, which are further away from the back of the lot and kind of an equal building mass behind it. So we are changing lot types because the slope has changed, because we've flattened it out, because we're filling, so it's dropping down less. And the market response that we had, we started with all villas. Phase 1C and 1D was townhouses and single family on the outside with more villas. The townhouses have been very well received. So we would like to build more townhouses in the same area. And we found that the mix of villas and single families and townhouses, as it has in many of our other neighborhoods, it works fine. It's best not to segregate the single families in one area and the townhouses in others and the villas. People don't mind buying the single families across from townhouses or single families across villas. That's been the market response that we've seen so far. So thank you very much for your time. This is in large part because of rock and our goal to fill on as we develop the rest of this site. And the product type has mixed mostly because of what we found from the market and how it fits in the site with the regrading.
I have a question.
Sure.
In phase 3, you mentioned the housing type being built that way to increase affordability. What is some of those mechanisms and the methodology behind which then creates it or makes it affordable?
Townhouse is just, affordability fundamentally is about square footage. Larger the house, the more it's going to cost basically by everybody who built it. So by building 1,500 square foot townhouses, it meets affordability for a lot more people. What you found in Waynesboro, I'm from Augusta County, I've lived in this area my whole life. What you've seen is this influx of townhouses in particular being built in the city of Waynesboro in the last couple of years. And D.R. Horton and Lennar and some of these other national builders, they're very good at it. They can build those very quickly. We are a production builder, but we're smaller, regional. What we found is a lot of people come and look at our townhouses, and then they'll go and look at D.R. Horton's townhouses, and then they'll come back to ours. It's a smaller unit, but Greenwood Homes is a well-built home. That's kind of our niche in the market. And what we found is our townhouses continue to, it's thin slicing the market.
And you said the other ones in phase 2 are also townhomes, correct?
There are some townhouses here.
So what makes those townhomes more affordable than the others?
They're about the same price. So townhouse is our lowest price point. There is a 20-foot townhouse and a 22-foot townhouse. So there is a slight difference in size, again, which helps us, again, thin slice the market.
The only reason I ask is because you made it seem as if the phase 3 was more of the affordable housing type versus the other townhomes.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's just all three product types. The townhouse is, of course, the more.
I have a question. You said in phase 2, excuse me, that you're filling in to avoid the rock. How are you achieving the basements in those villas?
It's where it falls off the side of the hill. So the street is going to be on the ridge, right?
Okay.
So you'll drive into the garage and then it falls off and then it chases grade. So the sewer line and the creek are down here. So the slope is all going this way.
Okay.
So everything on the outside would be walkout conditions, which we can only do in the villas and the single families.
Okay, so you're not having to blast rock to create
No, no,
the
no.
basements?
No,
Okay.
Basements help us work with steep slopes like you have in the valley. So if you go to flatter areas in Virginia, you'll hardly see a basement
Yeah.
because they don't have to chase grade like we do over here.
Okay, you use the magic word affordability. What's the price entry point for the?
We're in the 200s on our townhouses. What we find is that gets people in the door. Most people will pick up grades and push into the lower 300s. We judge affordability by velocity in the market, by how the market receives it.
Sure.
We built 22 townhouses, which are right here. I think we have 2 left, and we started sales in January. So that's pretty rapid for us. That's why it felt like we needed more townhouses closer in this area, because this area is all townhouses, and this will be, the D.R. Horton will be all townhouses down here. So it's just mixing them up. We find it fits better when it's mixed into the neighborhood, but in some places it's a little bit easier if you have that much rock to get the density.
Out of curiosity, clarifying, when you're saying 200s, are we talking 220 or are we talking 280 when you're in 200s?
280, yeah. That's home building talk, unfortunately.
All right, do we have any other questions for the app? Oh, I have one other, sorry. Do you find that the 6.5% is grade restriction is consistent with other jurisdictions around here? Or are we unusually restrictive?
Unusually restrictive.
Okay.
In Albemarle County, which is equally kind of as hilly, some of our new developments are pushing 10%, which is uncomfortable. 10% is not much fun to build a road on. To give you an idea is the rule I always remind people of, 5% is when you're in a parking lot, when you open your door, it comes back and hits you in the leg. So 5% is kind of the standard that you want for driveways, and you only go above 5% to 10% in places where you have to. And this graphic shows we only did it in a small section. It's just this one section of road. So, and that's because we have to connect to the grade that's here that's already established. So it's very unusual to have to do what we're doing here tonight and ask to go to 8%.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. All right, do we have anybody who's signed up to speak?
We do have one individual signed up, Matt Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Matt Johnson, and I live at 240 Ridgeline Drive. Chair Flory and members of the commission, this evening I'm here representing a group of current owner occupants and residents of Creekwood Village, most of whom live on the eastern side of Ridgeline Drive. We love our neighborhood, its character, its thoughtful design, and the balance it provides among various types of housing options. We come to you this evening concerned with Greenwood Homes' proposed changes to the subdivision plat for Creekwood Village, which will substantially increase housing density in our community. Their plan would convert 18 attached single-family villas and 17 detached single-family houses into 42 townhomes and villas. In total, these changes would nearly double the number of housing units along these portions of Springdale Road, Summerdean Drive, and Winterthal Road from 35 homes to 62 units. The Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions for Creekwood Village, signed by Alan Taylor, president of Riverbend Development and a member of the Greenwood Homes leadership team, states in part, Declarant desires to provide for the protection and enhancement of the value and desirability of Creekwood Village. We firmly believe the proposed changes Greenwood has before you this evening does nothing to further either of those goals. Instead, these changes push our community closer to becoming a predominantly townhome development, something far removed from its intended character. Beyond concerns about neighborhood identity, we must also consider the practical implications of these changes. Traffic and parking. More residents mean more vehicles. The portion of Ridgeline Drive south of Springdale Road will bear the brunt of this additional traffic, as our only current means of ingress and egress is through Tiffany Drive. In addition, based upon what we have already witnessed in portions of Creekwood Village where townhomes are located, we anticipate an increase in the number of individuals using on-street parking, essentially creating one-lane roadways that have the potential to limit not just the regular flow of traffic, but the ability for emergency vehicles to quickly access properties. Erosion and drainage. The additional land disturbance, grading, and slope work required to accommodate installation of the townhomes along Springdale Road poses the risk of runoff and soil erosion that could directly impact properties downhill on the eastern side of Ridgeline Drive. View shed concerns. Unlike attached and detached single-family homes that have breaks and gaps in them, townhomes follow a rigid structural form that does not conform well to road curvature. While the townhomes may be slightly smaller in depth, they will be pushed further into the lots and closer to the existing villas, dramatically altering the visual landscape. One of our members calculated that the vertical surface area visible from surrounding lots will increase by approximately 275%. Assuming these new townhomes match the two-story model currently built within the development, it would be even more if Greenwood builds the three-story models proposed along Tiffany Drive. So we come back to the initial statement and ask, does this proposal enhance the long-term value and desirability of Creekwood Village? Based upon the items touched upon above, the answer is no. What it does is set a precedent for continuous modifications that chip away at the integrity of our neighborhood. If the city does not draw the line now, future amendments will only further increase density, creating a community completely unrecognizable from the one we bought into. We urge you to deny the proposed subdivision plat modification and associated increase in the total number of lots proposed by Greenwood Homes. However, if denial is not feasible, we respectfully ask that approval be conditioned upon two requirements. One, prior to issuance of any certificates of occupancy for buildings built as part of this amendment, Greenwood Homes must develop, have approved, and implement a landscaping plan for the open space between the existing properties on the eastern side of Ridgeline Drive and new development along Springdale Road that includes enough hardwood trees to provide adequate screening for the existing homes. And two, completion of Ridgeline Drive to the intersection with Lou DeWitt Boulevard, ensuring it is open to all traffic before construction in the area of the amended plan moves forward. Creekwood Village deserves responsible development that prioritizes long-term community and value and desirability. We ask that the Planning Commission stand with us in preserving this vision. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much.
We don't have anyone else signed up, but I do have a letter we received that I will read. So this is from Andrew McAuliffe and his wife Bridget. They reside at 212 Ridgeline Drive in Creekwood Development, where they've been homeowners since June of 2024. In March of 2024, they were shown a number of homes in the development and decided to purchase their current home because the hillside and tree line in their backyard provided a pleasant view and a level of privacy that they did not find in any of the other homes that they were shown. The authorized agent for Creekwood assured them that in the future, although there could be building well beyond their backyard, it would be limited to a small number of villas or single-family homes, and the hillside would remain. They were fine with that and went ahead and purchased the home. Recently, they were made aware of the building plan that would far exceed the amount and type of homes that they were originally told. The plan would include the removal of all of the trees and part of the hillside in order to accommodate up to 30 townhouses. The news came as a surprise, given that they had been told by the Creekwood representative as recently as a month ago. They want to make clear that they are not suggesting that building of any kind should not take place, but they're very disappointed and almost feel misled about the scope of the new project and its possible removal of the privacy they purchased. In addition, they note that as homeowners on Ridgeline Drive, they should be informed in a timely manner regarding comprehensive plan to address parking, traffic, drainage, runoff, noise, etc. And they noted that they were unable to attend the meeting this evening, but were in opposition to the request.
Thank you. All right, do we have anyone who would wish to speak who is not signed up? All right, excellent. Then I am going to close the public hearing.
Can we respond?
Sure.
Yeah, because I'd like to, you hear 275% increased pavement. Curious if that meets your numbers or what you're seeing.
That's a difficult thing to calculate. I mean, I think Mr. Johnson was referring to the building mass. So, I mean, it's, you know, there's a roof of the villa that comes down that is significant. There's a significant building mass that goes along with that. I mean, 275% doesn't seem significant. I can just look at it from a site plan perspective between the two. To go back, sorry. This one. Between the two, where was this? There it is. Between the two options, I mean, there's. Would you like to, if you did a calculation? I did count. Okay, sure, go ahead.
Can you just state your name and address, please?
My name is Louis Carter. I live at 220 Ridgeline Drive. I'm a former planning and zoning commissioner, such as yourselves, in Saxe, Texas. I'm a retired licensed general contractor in Georgia and South Carolina. The calculations were made by taking the rear elevation of the typical villa unit that they had originally proposed. Each villa unit is 35 feet wide. From ground level to the roof line is approximately 11 feet. So you can take 35 times 11 times 18 and you get a certain square footage of exposure. If you take, assuming 2-story townhouses with an average of 26 feet wide by 30 units in 3 10-unit buildings, you get another number, and if you divide them into each other, you come up with 275% increase of building mass, and that's based on the elevation, the rear elevation that we on the lower side will have to visualize daily once they're built in comparison to substantially less based on the villas, and the villas have been marketed with this plan as recently as 1 month ago. I know because I've got a copy of it that was obtained by, you got the letter from the McAuliffes. Their sister went in the sales office and got a sales brochure, and that's what they were presented. Certainly not townhomes in that area. So I feel like while this may be a by right thought on your part, I've sat over there, I've heard these kinds of things from homeowners. I've had to make decisions just like y'all are having to make. But quality of lifestyle is what we bought, believed in, and trusted from this man and his representatives. Now we feel shafted. We do not feel that the true reason is anything other than monetary. We saw the construction trucks, we saw all of the workers, and we know and realize, yes, they sold those things like hotcakes. He said it out of his own mouth. They sold like crazy, only got 2 left. So he wanted to build more townhouses. Came from this man's mouth right here. I'm for America Free Enterprise. I have been all my life. But having sat there and heard the cries from neighbors in subdivisions, you have to get down to not an emotional decision, but a factual decision. Is he really, truly living by the code that he set in his covenants, which Matt read from? A quality, enjoyable, sustainable lifestyle. We bought it. Now he's going to try to take it away. And if he succeeds in doing so, it's only because you people vote for him. It's that much of an essential decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, the 2 points I wanted to make, Mr. Johnson had 2 conditions that he recommended at the end. One was the connection of Lou DeWitt to Lou DeWitt Boulevard, which is here. We've run into, as you expect, some rock issues and some utility issues, but we also have a regional gas line that's right here. So we've been negotiating with Columbia Gas to make the road crossing, because it'll be a public street for the city of Waynesboro. We feel like that's at the end, and we'll be making this connection to Lou DeWitt probably by the end of the summer. It just depends on the speed of phase 3. So certainly before a CO would be requested in phase 2. The second was landscaping that would help screen in this area. We're amenable to that. This area was erroneously removed in the first preliminary plat, but it was pointed out, we fixed it. We don't have a problem at all with providing an approved buffer landscape plan in that area. So I just want to make the point that those 2 conditions are acceptable and will be done anyway.
I have a question, if I can ask. If you stay with the villas, and have to get into the rock, how long is the blasting gonna take to put the villas in versus the townhomes? And how close are you blasting to the existing homes?
So the rule is 500 feet. So within 500 feet, we can't blast, which means that we have to go to a rock hammer.
Yep, with a nutcracker, which,
That's what's been happening across the creek at Silver Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard about that rock hammer over there.
I've
So
seen it.
that's the option, is that rock hammer takes much longer than blasting. Close as we are, we don't want to blast. You know, our goal over here is to minimize any rock at all and stay above it.
Okay,
It's unknown, but multiple months.
okay.
I have a question for staff. With our current buffers that we have, would there not have been something in place along that property line in the first place?
So I do not believe we have any kind of buffer requirement from, it's all RG5, and so that's our most flexible zoning district, and so we don't have buffer requirements between those similar uses.
Is there a way to make a friendly amendment to the proposed changes to include that there would be a buffer between those 2 properties, or the property line?
So specifically, what I heard the applicant address was in the open space area that does kind of remain there. And Alessandra, I don't know if you can highlight it. Thank you. So there is kind of a designated open space area right along there. And so what I heard the applicant saying was that they could add some additional screening there rather than it just being, plain open space, and have some kind of landscaping plan for that area.
So just out of curiosity, what would screening look like?
We've done it in a number of other neighborhoods. It's just it would be a mix of native trees, hardwoods, and evergreens to help create some depth of a buffer. I'm a landscape architect by training, so we would design it, but if there was a buffer standard that the city would like us to follow, we'd be happy with that as well.
Is that something that you would be willing to proffer as a part of this application?
Proper maybe a step too far because we're not in a rezoning, so that we're not in a position to specifically proper, but we can add it to the site plan. This preliminary plat governs the next submittal, which will be the site plan. So whatever's on, we can add it to the preliminary plat, and then it's required to be included within the site plan.
Well, you want to ask us a question or ask him a question? I think,
There should be different.
why don't you step up and speak, and then if he wants to address it, I mean,
I'm just trying to understand better what he explained. You said you needed to blast for
and
basement.
I'm sorry.
Correct.
Can you
I'm
state your
Sherry,
name
I
and
live at
address?
216 Ridgeline, so
Okay.
the villa's underneath. When you said the blasting was needed for basements, did I hear that correctly? No. So do you have to blast to put villas in, and you do not need to blast to put townhomes? Is that correct?
It's a little bit more complicated with that. We're minimizing the blasting, which creates flatter building pads, which allows us to do townhomes.
So you still might need to blast for townhomes?
Much less.
Much less, okay. I had heard that basements need blasting, and the villas don't have basements.
There was a question whether we would blast the basements. We said no, we're not.
Okay, that's all I would misunderstood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, curious how we could progress in terms of, in May, we set a bit of a precedent on a grading on Tiffany from a 6% to a 8.85% at the May meeting. We have a group of residents that feel like they kind of got sold a bill of goods and something that hasn't been honored. Now I hear some folks saying we ran into some rock and we're trying to do what's best for the neighborhood and also be able to meet with some of the requirements, and we're willing to make some of these conditions that have been asked for, but I also hear them going, well, you made us promises before, how can we be assured that these conditions that you're asking for? We are in a by right situation. We have set a precedent with a grading. You are making recommendations based on it's falling within the zoning. Is there a way that we can get assurances on the conditions that have been asked for by the neighborhood? And then I would just recommend the two heads sort of get back together again and discuss, because it seems like these are two parties that can and will work this out and figure it out, and I feel good about the options that have been happening. But I don't know from our standpoint what I can do as a commissioner within the structure that we've got set up. Is there a way to approve, vote for it with getting those conditions into the language?
I want to make sure my mic is on. Regarding the timing of the road improvement, I don't really think there's any way that you can incorporate that into a condition here. Regarding the voluntary installation of landscaping buffer between Phase 1A and 1B and Phase 2, I think what I'm hearing from the developer is that they're willing to do that and to submit it to staff for review. As submitted, the preliminary plat before you does not have that as a notation, but if the developer is willing to, amend and resubmit to bring before council, just a notation on the preliminary plat saying, buffer to be detailed at site plan stage for staff approval.
I think if we were willing to accept as part of an approval, a condition of the approval,
Yes.
that we would submit a buffer.
Well, and this is why I asked the question about proffer, because it strikes me that there may be a trust issue between the current residents and the developer, and so if there was something that was a little bit more binding, and I don't see a
There's no way that
legally.
you can do that.
Yeah.
The most you can do is some sort of conditioned approval of the
Yeah.
preliminary plat. And frankly, it really rests on the developer being willing to do that, because if he wasn't, there would be nothing that you could do about it.
Yeah.
Feels like a condition upon approval is our commitment, like that's enforceable.
But I have a question, maybe a suggestion, talking point, I'm not sure what, but you've said you've agreed to put in a buffer to downplay some of the view that they would see. But you're not gonna be planting 50-foot tall oak trees that they gonna walk out tomorrow and ain't gonna see nothing. So there is a time period that there is gonna be houses seen, and hell, I probably wouldn't live long enough to see it grow up to where they wouldn't be.
Well, but again,
not-
I mean, we can't make them put the
No.
buffer in, and even our buffer requirements
Wouldn't-
between uses
Yeah,
require.
wouldn't even do
Yeah.
that, so.
All right.
So yeah, I think that you could condition your approval on that, and then staff would be looking for some notation to be added before kind of final signing of the plat.
All right, I have not closed the public hearing, and I see the gentleman with his hand up. So I'm going to recognize him and let him come back up and speak. I'm going to ask you to just keep your remarks brief, and then we're going to close
Be
the
no
public
more than
hearing.
about 5 or 10 words. You have the opportunity to table this for another hearing so that this gentleman can create on his plat material the buffering that we're discussing and that we're requesting. You have the opportunity to table that is legally available to you. That's my answer. Would you be willing to table so that you can correct and accomplish? That way, when you come back, we won't even have to be here. It's all taken care of.
So if I may, we are going through some subdivision ordinance changes that are
Yeah.
also going to be discussed tonight. And it's a state code change where the planning commission will no longer review preliminary plats. So this process won't happen. They'll rest with staff, and that's a state code change. So we're working in that place also, that we would be looking, certainly for, if you were to approve the preliminary plat based on the condition of plantings that to be reviewed by staff within that area, then certainly it would be, then in our hands as an administrative approval, we would be making sure that was done. But again, we wouldn't have, it's an offer that they're making, and something that we know the planning commission is interested in seeing. But this process is changing, and your staff now will be final approval on plats, and that is a state code change that we are obligated to make.
And your assumption of a trust issue is quite accurate.
Well, warranted or not, I'm just trying to address everybody's concerns. All right,
Thank you.
May I ask one question? Forgive my ignorance of this whole situation. Is this whole plat change brought about just solely under the auspices of you guys are trying to save the residents the aggravation of blasting through rock? It's easier to do that to put the townhomes in?
well, all right, hang
Can
on.
I ask if you
Yeah,
could come
step-
forward?
Yeah, step up and state your name.
Sorry. Ryan Barnett. My wife owns the place at 200 Ridgeline Drive.
Okay. And we are here, and this is a public forum, we are happy to facilitate discussion and be a part of discussion. But to the extent that, maybe the developer has questions that you guys can answer, I think we've worked through a lot of that. So if you have comment for us and then he wants to respond, I'd be happy for you to do that.
So again, is this plat change by the applicant under the auspices of solely, essentially, from what I keep hearing, is we're trying to save the residents the aggravation of blasting through rock, because it looks like it would be easier to put that row of townhomes, because you don't have to do that because of the grade, et cetera. I'm certainly no engineer. I'm just trying to listen to what's happening. That's my comment, question, whatever.
Thank you. Do you have a response? And if the answer is no, the answer is no. That's
Yeah,
totally fine.
Our answer is the same. We have two main issues. One is rock, one is is a responsive market.
Understand. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on this matter at this time. Do we need to have any further discussion among the commissioners?
No.
You know, I have an observation, and not to belabor this point, but we, those of us who have been on the commission for a minute, struggle mightily, consistently with both by right development, which we have no ability to deny. We have no discretion to deny, and we invite suit against the city if we deny. And density that was set by zoning and by the demands on the market the last time the city's comprehensive plan was updated, which was on the order of 15 or 20 years ago. That's a part of the reason that many of us on the Planning Commission are a part of the steering committee for the comprehensive plan, is because we are trying to help contextualize density and the density that's coming to the city in the reality of what all of its citizens need to see. And I think what we have seen and what we have heard consistently from our citizens regarding density is that the rising tide is not lifting all boats. And it is a challenge for us to consider that in the context of by right developments where property owners have the ability to do what they would like with their property. That is their absolute right, just like you have the right to do what you want on your property. And we really, outside of our existing regime, have no ability to tell them what to do with their property, and recognizing that they have a business to run. And I just want to make that observation to all of you, some of you who I have seen at Planning Commission meetings before and some I have not, that we share many of the concerns that we hear on a regular basis about zoning. And I look forward to seeing each and every one of you at the Comprehensive Plan open house tomorrow night, so you can talk with us more about some of these issues and what you think we ought to be doing and how the Comprehensive Plan ought to change. So that's I have a pulpit and I'm going to use it for this evening. Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve based off staff's recommendations and also add a condition for staff to visit the voluntary buffer that would be placed along bordering properties.
As well as a connecting road to Ludewitt, are you adding that?
Like it's already in the work.
Well, hang on. What?
So that road connection is part of the plat. I think they're specifically talking about timing, and I'm not sure we have the ability.
It's not something that we're reasonably able to control in connection with this amendment.
All right,
So we just moved to the previous motion that was stated.
All right. Do we have a second?
And if I might suggest a friendly, my concern is the preciseness with which we're describing the area where the buffer is to be placed.
Thank you, yeah.
And so, not to belabor the point, but I think I would suggest language for the motion, that it be a motion to approve based on the recommendation from staff, with the condition that a voluntary buffer be installed in the area between Phase 2 and Phase 1A and B that is adjacent to the east of Phase 1D.
I couldn't type fast
All
enough.
right.
Did somebody get that?
So, Mr.
So
Stewart,
moved.
hang on. Mr. Stewart, would you like to amend your motion to include that language?
Yes, I would
All
like
right.
to amend my motion to approve.
Trusting that
language.
staff
Thank you,
has
Jordan.
captured that language. All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you all very much for coming out. We appreciate your feedback.
And tomorrow night, that open house is at Waynesboro High School, and it is from 4:30 to 7:30. You can drop in anytime. Thank you.
All right, next we have public hearing for amendment to City Code Chapter 74 subdivision ordinance.
Okay, so this is amendment to City Code Chapter 74, which is our subdivision ordinance chapter. So the subdivision ordinance regulates and controls the division of land within the city, and this version of the ordinance was adopted on November 27th in 2000, when the prior ordinance was repealed in its entirety and replaced. There have been two major revisions since then, once in 2017 and then again in 2022. So the proposed revisions I'm going to be going over tonight sort of fall into three broad categories. The first set of changes are bringing the ordinance into compliance with new and existing Virginia Code requirements. The second group of changes address what's needed to allow for subdivisions to take place in cottage court housing developments. That ordinance was approved by council earlier this year, and some small changes need to be made to the subdivision ordinance to allow for that. And then finally, to fix some administrative issues that have been identified in the ordinance since the last two major updates in 2017 and 2022. So the first grouping of changes, compliance with the Code of Virginia, and the first set of those is regarding the subdivision procedures. So these new changes are going to be effective July 1st, and this most recent legislative session, they changed the requirements for the review and approval of subdivision plats within the Code of Virginia. The new requirements remove the Planning Commission and governing body approval authority, and instead assigns that responsibility to the designated agent. And in Waynesboro, that agent is the subdivision agent. The changes that were approved also reduce the timeline for plat approvals. These are from 60 days to 45 days for preliminary plats, 40 days for final plats, and 30 days for resubmittals. So in regards to the subdivision, specifically preliminary plat review process, currently the subdivision agent reviews and approves all minor and final plats administratively, but with this change, it means that all plat approval, including that of preliminary plats, which have originally come before you, will be administrative and no longer require this public hearing process and then approval by the Planning Commission. So multiple changes to address these have been made in Article 2 of the subdivision ordinance, and those changes were removal of certain requirements such as the public hearing for preliminary plats, the change of Planning Commission to subdivision agents in many sections, and so all those changes were made to Article 2. The next set of these compliance changes are specifically relating to bonding requirements, and these are current Virginia Code requirements. We just weren't quite in line with them. So the subdivision ordinance requires that all public improvements, so that's things like utilities and streets, that were approved in a development's public improvement plans, they need to either be constructed by the developer and then accepted by the city, or the developer needs to provide a subdivision performance guarantee, which is also known as a bond, prior to the ability to issue a final subdivision plat. So this whole process is called bonding, and it's overseen by our Public Works Department. Subdivision ordinance's existing language doesn't follow the provisions that were laid out by the Code of Virginia in two specific areas. The first is regarding the calculations for the bond amounts, and then also the process for full or partial release of those bonds. And so changes have been made to Article 5 that brings the city into compliance with Virginia Code for both of these aspects of the bonding process. Second group of changes that have been made to the subdivision ordinance has to do with the cottage court housing. This ordinance was approved earlier this year, and as I said, does contain that option to subdivide a property as part of its development. And to allow this, there are three sections of the subdivision ordinance that would require changes. The first is section 74-21A1, which outlines the criteria for minor subdivisions and includes the requirement that all new lots front on an existing public street. In a cottage court development, houses would front on a common area as opposed to that public street in most cases. And so exception language was added to that section that refers the user back to the applicable section of the zoning ordinance for the requirements for cottage housing, which is section 98-4.2.13. And this is a very similar thing that's done for the next two sections. Section 74-62 are the requirements for lots within new subdivisions. And so Part B provides requirements for the sidelines of lots be based on the street frontage. And then in that same section, Part F requires that each lot front on a public street and that street extends across the entire frontage of that lot. And so that same exception language has been added to both of these sections that points the users back to the zoning ordinance for specific requirements relating cottage housing. The final group of changes are more administrative in nature. Some of these are more in-depth than others. So the first change is the addition of language that encourages the use of native plantings and landscaping that's installed by the developer, and this is in section 74-64, which specifically deals with the preservation of natural features and amenities. This particular addition, though, isn't enforceable, but it encourages. And native plantings are naturally adapted to the local environment, and they also usually require less water and maintenance and support local wildlife. So it's a good thing to encourage, even though we cannot enforce that. The second group of changes happen within section 74-71, and these are the design standards for new streets and alleys. So the first section, which changes, is that Part I, the grades. Staff is finding that the topography of many sites, and in some cases rock, the 6% limit is too strict, and Public Works has recognized this. And so this proposed change would still make the requirement, or keep the requirement for that 6% grade, but allow the city engineer working with Public Works to permit grades steeper than that based on specific sites. It was noted that grades between 6 and 9% would be more feasible and have less adverse impact on the environment in certain cases. And so this change would allow Public Works and the city engineer to work with the developer to determine those. The second section is an addition for pedestrian crossings. This was not something that was previously required in the subdivision ordinance, and so this basically adds that requirement for pedestrian crossings. You need to have crosswalks in a subdivision design. And then the final is a provision for secondary access. In the past, the fire department has expressed concerns regarding the number of homes on a single point of access, and they have recommended several times that some threshold be set after which a secondary means of access would be required. The city has adopted the Virginia Statewide Fire Prevention Code, which requires a secondary means of access for more than 30 dwelling units. And so this proposed change would require that secondary means of access for any development that contains 30 or more single-family residential units. The final sort of major change to the ordinance is in section 74-84, which is the water supply. Here, a new section has been added to clarify that the developer of a property is responsible for ensuring that adequate water supply and capability exists to provide for adequate fire protection for a proposed development. And this would include ensuring that fire flow can be met, and that any needed improvements to ensure that the fire flow can be met are and the fire hydrants and the distribution systems that go along with those are installed and constructed by the contractor according to city requirements. And then finally, there are several additional changes that are more minor in nature, and these changes clarify wording, they fit some formatting inconsistencies that have been discovered, they apply rephrasing that was missed in prior updates, and they also correct the references to city departments, job titles, and procedures to match what is currently in force. Oops, I forgot to delete that slide.
Could you go back to Two slides.
Sure. Which,
Please. There.
okay.
The secondary access, along with other, was there any concerns about like adding parking requirements or like off-street parking? Or like encouraging like impermeable land?
So not specifically with our subdivision ordinance. We do cover parking requirements on our zoning ordinance. And those were recently amended for townhomes. And we do have requirements on kind of driveway widths and things like that related to impervious surface. But the subdivision ordinance wouldn't be the place typically for parking information.
But this was also talking like about cottage-style subdivisions, right?
So this was, the changes in this subdivision ordinance were only to allow the cottage, the cottage ordinance is already in effect, but it created some inconsistencies because the subdivision ordinance said in order to subdivide, you have to have frontage on a public road.
Right.
Well, the cottage ordinance doesn't. So the intent with these changes was just to point anywhere where it said new lots have to front on a public street and it has to go across the entire frontage of the lot. You were just able to point back and say, unless it's a cottage development, then this provision doesn't apply.
So you're essentially including subdivision language into the cottage style language of how things have to work.
I think the intention is that the cottage style ordinance is approved and that ordinance, that zoning ordinance allows you to have frontage on a public green, not on a public road, but our subdivision ordinance requires frontage on a public road. So it was to create consistency between the cottage ordinance that was already adopted and the subdivision ordinance.
The frontage part I get, I guess I'm just overarching, you're now applying the subdivision rules to cottage-style housing.
So that every development should abide by your zoning and the subdivision. And so because cottage housing, we allowed subdivisions within that, it also needed to match the subdivision ordinance, or at least be talked about in the subdivision ordinance and not create inconsistencies. So all developments have to comply to both the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance. So cottage is in the zoning, and now we have made sure that the subdivision ordinance, or with approval, would make sure that the subdivision ordinance is consistently allowing cottage and the division of cottage and not creating any kind of inconsistencies.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just comment, a group of us met with Senator Warner last week, and one of the things that he was promoting was affordable housing. I talked about Waynesboro's drive into this cottage language. He was, praised us for doing that to get more affordable housing, and he also said reducing any type of red tape or bureaucratic. So I think doing this and taking the process and putting it in staff hands versus having us to review it first and then go back before staff, I'm in favor of as well. Anything that can streamline the process is a good thing, and anything that allows more affordable housing in our area is a good thing as well. So the changes that I read and reviewed, I like and appreciate the edits and the language changes.
And this is a public hearing, just, so we should open and close.
All right, I'm going to open the public hearing for an amendment to City Code Chapter 74 subdivision ordinance. I take it we have nobody signed.
No one signed up to speak.
Jim?
All right, hearing no persons wanting to speak, I'm going to close the public hearing for amendment to City Code Chapter 74 subdivision ordinance. All right, I have questions. Secondary access. So the way this currently reads, secondary means of fire apparatus access. So are we gonna run into a situation where they, instead of putting a secondary entry and exit road, they're gonna put some kind of fire lane?
So what we often struggle with is when we're in some kind of site development meeting with the developer, if there's only one way in and one way out, the fire department has
Right.
concerns about that. But we also have other parts of our ordinance that requires connectivity to existing platted streets on adjacent property. So often, there might be an instance where they're looking at some kind of fire-only access, whether for a temporary amount of time or a permanent amount of time. It would never serve as the primary entrance to the development because the subdivision requires that they have frontage on the public road. But there could be an instance where, say, they wanted to do 40 units, or any number over 30, that they might propose a fire-only access, but staff also has other kind of teeth within the ordinance to require if there's an adjacent property that has a platted road to it, they have to make that connection. There are just certain circumstances where it can be.
So I shouldn't be worried, so it strikes me that more than one way in and one way out for developments containing more than 30 houses is good planning anyways. So what you're telling me is I should not be worried about some unforeseen end around to provide one regular person ingress egress with some little weird thing for fire only to avoid additional expense because of the other requirements that exist.
Yeah, so they would always have a public road, I mean, cottage housing aside, I don't want to muddy
Right.
the water, but they would all have to front on a public road, so that would be their primary ingress
Right.
and egress, but there could be the potential where if they wanted to go over 30 units, there was a fire access road that went around, looped around behind, that could serve as their secondary access. But then again, we're always looking, localities have different numbers, and when a permanent one is required or a temporary one, currently we don't have any, and we rely on kind of the fire chief and the comments around that to communicate that. And often in cases when we're looking at it, it could be something that if it depends. If it was 35 units and there was no other possible way to connect, then maybe it would be a temporary fire a fire access that wasn't temporary. But
So what if we said a secondary means of access shall be provided to facilitate fire apparatus? That way they have to provide, instead of doing something for my concern is that you have either a cottage home or a regular development where otherwise good planning and general safety concerns regarding fire apparatus suggest that the best outcome is more than one method of ingress and egress to the neighborhood, for example. And the developer finds a way to create something that is not ingress and egress, but is fire apparatus access, because all they have to do is provide secondary fire apparatus access and not secondary ingress and egress, because of the way that is phrased.
So I would say we currently don't have anything, and staff uses that sentence is currently not in there at all in our subdivision ordinance. And staff this is a way to help us put a number on it, because we often have a developer say, well, in Augusta County, they let me go up to 50, or they let me go up to 100 before they require the secondary access. And so we're looking to be able to point to a number and say 30 is our limit before you're then required to have a second way for access. And does it say?
It says fire.
Fire apparatus
Fire apparatus.
access, and that's my concern, is should it say ingress egress to facilitate fire apparatus, not fire apparatus access. And maybe there's no difference, maybe I'm
No, I
Flying
think
flies
the
while the
concern
elephants
is
go.
valid, and I'm actually the culprit of adding the word fire apparatus into it. So I'll answer for why I did, which is essentially that in order for that requirement for us to be confident in enforcing it, if somebody
Right.
comes up with a plat and saying, no, we're going to reject your plat, you need to do this. To require the fire apparatus access, there's a clear public safety nexus. And I feel like we are on firm ground saying, hey, we got the safety concern, we're not gonna approve your plat. I could imagine a very likely scenario where we have a 30-unit development that there's, maybe it doesn't border another development, so there's no interparcel connectivity. And now we're requiring, essentially 2 entrances onto the same road at significant expense, where there's not really a good public safety justification for doing that. And so I guess the concern that I have is that if you remove the word fire apparatus and you just say, look, there will be 2 means of access for every development that has 30 lots, I'm concerned that that is a little unreasonable as far as the expense and condition that we're putting on the developer.
And I would point out, I think that the 30 number came from fire code, so it
Yeah, I have no.
based around that.
I have no quarrel with the fight with that number, and I understand what you're saying. And again, maybe I'm seeing something, maybe I'm concerned about something that I shouldn't be concerned about because of other stuff in the code. So I'll leave it at, having drawn your attention to it, I'll leave it at that.
Well, and I appreciate that you drew our attention to it. So Q, that provision in your packet says secondary access. A secondary means of fire apparatus access shall be provided for developments containing 30 or more, and it says single-family residential units. We really need to change that just to say
that was
30 or more residential.
Part 2 of my question
Okay.
was.
Let me give you a real-world example of this amendment right here.
It's one building.
Over off of Fifth on D Street where I live at, currently Shields built it 30 years ago. It's currently one way in, one way out. The lots between Kirby and Sunset Park have been up for sale. I don't know if they've been bought and purchased, but we're advertised as developable with way more than 30 units going in there. Now, how would that amendment to the code affect that subdivision over there? Because the only way in and out is Fifth Street, and there's 50-plus houses back there already. You throw another 30 or 40 on there, you got 100 units back there with one way in, one way out.
Yes, I mean, certainly existing development, or existing subdivisions that exist prior to this, but our hope is that we're trying to fix that issue in the future, not creating additional problems like that. To Will's point and to Jordan's point, maybe, and this is something that staff could consider looking at, is there maybe a number for a secondary fire apparatus access? And then is there a larger number that maybe isn't tied to fire code? I know Augusta County has a higher number. I can't remember if it's 50 or 100. I want to say it's 100 on a single access. If it's more than 100, you have to have 2. Or some kind of boulevard entrance, and we've talked about that in other developments too. So I wonder if it's maybe a tiered, like 30 is related to the fire code, but then maybe through our comprehensive planning process and additional discussions with fire, we talk about maybe a high-end max where it's a permanent access. So that's something we could look at.
Because I'm not sure why Kirby Avenue or D Street or 4th Street were never connected out of that subdivision.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was built 30 years ago by Shields, and I understand there was some wheeling and dealing done to get the sidewalks removed out of that development. So, but if the property between Kirby and Sunset Park is developed, that's a major increase in traffic in and out of Fifth Street, and the only other way is to come directly in off of Sunset Park. And I don't think you want public access crossing Sunset Park to get fire apparatus or any other apparatus in there, even if you don't include regular traffic. And of course, there's a big tract of land that's the solar farm on the backside of it, but the front part of it is developable. Mm-hmm. So that would be another development at the end of Fifth Street with one way in, one way out. So,
Yeah, I think it's something we need to visit, probably add to our list of things that we probably should be talking about with comprehensive plan.
And I'm not saying it can't be done. Really, the concern was imposing two regular access
Right.
at this level.
Right.
So the idea of a tiered approach, I think, is feasible.
My next question is with pedestrian crossings. So, did we, and I didn't see the old language, that's an addition.
It is a brand new addition. I mean, we usually, just definitely in the past several subdivisions, in the past several years, we've tried to identify areas where we think they need to be had. I think this helps give us teeth to that when we ask them to, well, where does it say in your code that we need to show that? And then also, there is certain transportation-related requirements that should go along with like a mid-block crossing or something like that, that we would want them to prepare that documentation to make sure that a crossing at that location meets certain standards.
So, I am thinking about this in the context of the Hopeman Parkway, the DR Horton New Hopeman Parkway, because we spent a lot of time on that application talking about the pedestrians crossing Hopeman Parkway there. Would this require that developer to construct or line on the road a pedestrian crosswalk across Hopeman Parkway there?
So the new wording says that pedestrian crossings compliant with city requirements shall be constructed at all new street intersections and any existing intersections where sidewalks, bicycle trails, or a greenway are required to be installed in connection with the subdivision. So I'm not sure
Regardless of
within
the
the
merit of such, it strikes me that the way that we have this written, if there was sidewalk across the street from that new development, this existing intersections where they're required to be installed in connection with the subdivision, you're creating a pedestrian connection across Hopeman Parkway there. So is that what we're?
Well, and I think in those instances, we would definitely be looking at, is there receiving infrastructure?
Right.
And the city engineer would kind of be evaluating that. Again, it's kind of a site review team. Everybody looks
Right.
at it. We provide comments back to the applicant. And then in some of those instances, it would be, to make sure this crossing is compliant with the traffic volume and everything in the area, what improvements are needed to make that safe. So we're hoping that this addition kind of gives us that teeth to look at what's receiving on either side, what's around those intersections, not only within the development, but potentially at those intersections or crossings where they,
are we talking about
Sidewalk or
controlling the crosswalks with lights or, I know on Hopeman Parkway, you would probably put stoplights and a push button thing.
so that goes back to, there's a very specific form that
Okay.
gets filled out, and I'm not an expert on it, but traffic engineers do
Yeah.
it, and they identify, what the speed is, they're looking at what the daily trips is, the number of lanes, and all of those things factor into what would be required at the crossing to make it safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't speak to that specifically, but yes, certain levels are different, whether it's lit or just signage and crossing, there's other things.
Yeah, and my concern is, like I said, with respect to the Hopeman Parkway one, we were really concerned about pedestrian access there. So if we do it there, and then if the site review plan says for a development like that, yeah, absolutely, we're worried about pedestrian crossing, we want you to facilitate or construct, even if it's as simple as lining the street across Hopeman Parkway there, and then 6 months or a year later, we have a similar development in a place where we're less concerned about pedestrian access because the character of the neighborhood is different, and we don't require it there because the site review team is not as concerned about it. I think we're going to have people unhappy about the inconsistent application of the rule.
Yeah, this being in the ordinance, it would be our hope that we're not having those inconsistencies.
Right.
That we're checking the box as we go through, whereas without it in there, it's something that gets brought up, but maybe doesn't get.
Well, and you certainly have no ability to consider it if it's not in the ordinance. I would love it if we could make them put in crosswalks from new sidewalks to existing sidewalks. I'm not sure that we can, but something certainly to consider, because that's, people complaining about inconsistent treatment seems to be one of the most frequent pieces of feedback that we have. Okay, sorry to beat those two horses to death. Those were the questions that I had.
And so I'm just pointing out that with that provision Q, we would make some kind of change that it's say 30 or more residential units rather than single family. And we would probably think of some provision for multifamily, like because you're gonna have more than 30 units often, but if it's one complex, so that might be something and I would need to check with fire to see if they have any specific provisions.
And I think I would certainly be comfortable recommending the amendments with the latitude for you guys to go back and modify.
Okay, great.
That. I don't know if any commissioners have different feelings, but I think we have raised these issues sufficiently with you all that you can tinker with them, or not if you think that I'm a crazy person. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the plat changes.
So we need an amendment to City Code Chapter 7.
City Code, the amendments to the City Code.
Chapter 74 of the subdivision ordinance.
Yep.
With the suggestion that staff consider our feedback regarding tiered multi-point access for certain size subdivisions, the feedback we provided regarding fire apparatus and crosswalks. All right, having that motion sufficiently set forth, do we have a second? Any further discussion?
To make the motion and ask for.
I clarified Mr. Gibson's.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't make a motion. I clarified Mr.
Yep.
Gibson's motion.
Okay.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, next we have the review of minor subdivisions and final subdivision plats approved since the May 20th, 2025 meeting.
I have just two of those for you this evening. The first one is off of King Avenue. You have, was it William Perry? I'm blanking on the school name. William Perry right here. Right here, and you have the, some townhouses right here. It's the three parcels back behind those townhouses or apartments. So 3 parcels back behind here. They're looking to do a lot line adjustment. There are 2 houses that currently exist, and so what they're doing is they're combining, they're creating 2 smaller lots for those 2 residential houses and then 1 larger lot that wraps around them. That's what they were doing with this. So it's basically a lot line adjustment plat.
With an eye towards
Selling the big one.
I don't even know why I asked. Never mind.
The second one I have for you tonight, the title did not get changed. I apologize. This is actually Creekwood Phase 3, Creekwood Village Phase 3. So that's that area behind Martin's that we discussed earlier. This was the final plat for I believe it was 87 townhouses. So that was approved in this last month. That's all I have for you this evening.
All right, thank you. Public comment period for items not on the agenda. Mr. Wood? All right. Seeing no other members of the public present to comment, we'll move on to matters from staff.
So one thing that I have that I just wanted to remind everyone is tomorrow night at Waynesboro High School from 4:30 to 7:30 is our kickoff open house meeting for the comprehensive plan. And just for anyone who might be watching our meeting this evening, it really is the very beginning of the process. So we don't have portions of the plan that we're asking you to respond to, but there is going to be a lot of great activities and ability for individuals to provide feedback around several different aspects. So we ask you just to come and share your feedback and your input as we really just begin the process.
See you there. Commissioners' correspondence and communication. Excellent. Oh,
Nope, I have none.
all right. Then do we have a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you all.